Picture this. A woman, Tammy, tirelessly praying, cleaning, cooking in cramped motel rooms, begging landlords for just a little bit of mercy. But in the end, her life, her home, it just crumbled. And the really gut-wrenching part, it wasn't because she stopped fighting, not at all. It was because her partner, Paul, simply, well, he wasn't there. He never really showed up.
Yeah, and this is a really raw exploration we're doing today, looking at what happens when a life just unravels under that kind of immense pressure. We're talking about the stark realities of eviction, these repeated, almost cruelly ironic RV calamities, and then this awful purgatory of just living in hotels. This is the deep dive, the fall of the House of Ollis. It's a very specific, really deeply human chapter in what is actually a much larger story of resilience and struggle.
Right. And as we started piecing together Tammy's story, using her own words, her videos online, her personal accounts, what became so clear almost immediately was this profound disconnect. It's her, unwavering action versus Paul's consistent inaction. It's this theme, this motif that just runs through their entire journey. It paints this vivid, almost painful picture of a household, both literally their home and metaphorically their relationship, that just couldn't withstand the immense weight of that imbalance. So our mission today is really to dive deep into this personal struggle, to understand not just the hardships Tammy faced, which were immense, but also the unexpected resilience she somehow found amidst these overwhelming odds, and also how systemic issues, around housing and support systems, how they intersect with these really profound personal challenges.
Absolutely. And what's truly illuminating here, I think, is how these specific tangible problems in their daily life, like those persistent plumbing issues we'll get into, they really transcended mere inconvenience. They became these powerful, almost visceral symbols of the neglect that was just slowly corroding their existence. And of course, the disproportionate burden that then settled squarely on Tammy's shoulders. So this deep dive, it really offers a critical lens, a way to observe how the most foundational elements of life, clean water, a stable home when they're compromised, they don't just create practical difficulties. They trigger this whole cascading series of personal, emotional, and psychological crises that can be utterly devastating.
Okay, so let's start with that very first crack in the foundation, the one that really set the stage for everything that followed. And it was something so fundamental: water. Or rather, the profound, debilitating lack of it. For an almost, it's hard to fathom, but for a really long time, the plumbing at the Ollis' former home was this persistent, deeply unsettling problem. Tammy, in her own accounts, she revealed she had given Paul thousands over time to fix it. Just imagine that for a moment. Thousands of dollars painstakingly chipped away from their already meager resources, all just funneled towards a problem that never, ever got resolved. This wasn't just about, a leaky faucet. This was about a fundamental denial of a basic human need, slowly eroding their quality of life.
And the impact of this, well, wasn't just practical, was it? It was profoundly psychological. Tammy herself put it so heartbreakingly clearly. She said, when you don't have water, and you can't clean your house properly, it does something to you. Think about the insidious, pervasive emotional toll of living in a home you just can't adequately clean. Especially for someone like Tammy, who, by her own admission and, through her actions, clearly prioritizes cleanliness. It was huge for her. Her background as a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, that meant she understood, maybe more acutely than many, the critical importance of hygiene, sanitation, order. Not just for health, but for dignity, right? So to be denied the most basic means to maintain that standard in her own living space, day after day, week after week, it must have been just agonizing. This lack of control over fundamental sanitation, it can systematically erode your sense of dignity, your personal agency, your mental well-being. It leads to profound stress and ultimately this deep sense of despair. It's really a classic example of what we often call unseen labor. That constant mental and emotional effort just to navigate and try to mitigate a continuously deteriorating situation that really should be a given, like running water.
Exactly. And despite her clear distress, despite the literal thousands of dollars she put forward, Paul just never resolved the issue. And it wasn't for lack of trying on Tammy's part either. She wasn't just sitting there waiting. She was actively seeking solutions. She even offered to hire a plumber herself. That just clearly demonstrates her proactive stance, her unwavering willingness to find a solution, even when Paul seemed completely paralyzed by the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that she stated this in court during proceedings, that just further underscores her desperation and her efforts to highlight Paul's passivity. It paints such a vivid picture of her relentless attempts to fix a situation that was just spiraling catastrophically out of control. Even if it meant taking on the full crushing burden herself, it was like she was desperately trying to bail out the sinking ship virtually alone.
And this profound inaction It had dire, cascading consequences, not just for them, but actually for an entire community. The unresolved plumbing issues didn't just affect the Ollises, they led to their house being officially condemned. And then, in this terrifying escalation, the entire park was condemned, which meant everyone, every single resident, including the Ollises, was forced to leave with very little warning or preparation. This transition, from a personal plumbing problem to a systemic housing crisis for a whole community, that's a really critical point. It vividly illustrates how individual issues, if they're left unaddressed, can rapidly become overwhelming. They trigger this domino effect of problems that are just impossible for one person or even one family to manage. For you listening, just consider how quickly a single, seemingly manageable issue like a leaky pipe can just escalate into an existential crisis when there's that fundamental imbalance in responsibility and effort, and when those broader support systems just aren't there.
Exactly. It's that stark contrast, that painful motif that just keeps reappearing throughout their entire journey. She had faith, he had excuses, and as we know from the source material, a vape habit that seemed to consume whatever little resources he might have contributed. The deep-seated faith she held, the relentless physical and emotional effort she poured into their lives, it was just constantly undermined by his inertia and, let's be honest, his reported habits that did nothing to alleviate their increasingly dire situation. It was a partnership in name, but really it was a solo struggle in reality.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really starkly illustrates how critical thinking, any semblance of future planning, it becomes virtually impossible under that kind of extreme chronic duress. When you're constantly fighting just for basic needs like clean water and shelter, your cognitive capacity to strategize for the future is just severely diminished. The immediate grinding reality overshadows everything else. This highlights the profound so what of their rapid descent into homelessness. It's not just losing a home. It's a loss of agency, a loss of the ability to plot a path forward. And the immense disproportionate burden placed on one partner when you're facing such overwhelming, relentless challenges. Tammy's constant internal battle, which we see later with her struggle with the depression and cabin fever in the hotel, that wasn't just sadness. It was the psychological exhaustion of being the sole strategic planner, the sole emotional rock, and the sole provider in a situation just spiraling out of control.
And then came the eviction. Just abrupt, brutal. The landlord gave them a strict, unyielding deadline to vacate the property. It was this crushing weight added to an already unbearable situation. And, predictably, devastatingly, Paul had no plan. None whatsoever. This wasn't just a lack of foresight. It felt like a fundamental abdication of responsibility. He left Tammy to handle the monumental, chaotic task of packing up their entire life alone amidst just sheer pandemonium and despair. Can you even begin to imagine the frantic energy, the gut-wrenching despair, trying to gather your entire existence with no clear destination, no tangible support, and this merciless ticking clock counting down to homelessness? Every box packed must have felt like a punch to the gut.
Yeah, and what's particularly striking, almost tragically so, is the immediate and devastating consequence of this unpreparedness. Their desperate attempt to secure housing via an RV, which Tammy herself had painstakingly acquired, remember, it immediately resulted in disaster. Almost as soon as they tried to move it, 2 tires blew out on the RV she bought. Bang. This wasn't just a physical setback or a stroke of bad luck. It was an immediate and brutal financial blow. $2,000 gone, just like that. Which is a staggering sum, given their already precarious and diminishing circumstances. This incident just vividly illustrates how quickly, in a crisis, even proactive, resourceful steps can be completely undone by unforeseen events, or maybe a critical lack of proper execution and shared responsibility. It's a prime example of how misfortune can just compound, making escape from poverty feel like this impossible uphill battle.
And that's precisely when Tammy reached her breaking point. You can hear it in her voice almost. She described the utter exhaustion and despair with this raw honesty, saying, "I just said, forget it. I'm done with it." It's just visceral, almost guttural, an expression of how immense the pressure was, how completely overwhelmed she felt, not just physically, but spiritually. She had poured every ounce of her being, every fiber of her faith into this, only for it to fall apart at the very first critical hurdle. It wasn't just the RV tires that blew. It felt like her spirit was threatening to burst under the strain.
And that raises a critical question, doesn't it, about what it truly means to be done in such an extreme situation. Is it genuine surrender? Or is it maybe a moment of profound emotional exhaustion that then, paradoxically, can lead to a new kind of resilience? Because our source material shows us that despite this moment of utter despair, this feeling of being completely broken, Tammy somehow, she continued to fight. This rapid descent into homelessness, marked by immediate financial loss and the disproportionate burden on one partner, it's a textbook example of how quickly stability can just unravel when those underlying issues of neglect, profound lack of planning, and an imbalance of effort are present. As Cammie herself reflected, she begged God for a miracle, and Paul couldn't even seem to beg for work. That fundamental, almost cosmic dynamic just defines their struggle.
So with that first RV attempt as a catastrophic failure, their next desperate stop was a hotel. But this wasn't a temporary stopgap, not in the way most people think of it. It rapidly became their holding pattern, their new confining normal. And it came at this agonizingly steep price, $390 a week after week. That sum just relentlessly chipped away at any remaining resources they might have had, slowly turning what was supposed to be a temporary solution into this crushing, significant, and ultimately unsustainable ongoing financial drain. It was like bleeding money just to exist.
Yeah, living in a hotel indefinitely, particularly under that kind of financial duress, it introduces this unique and relentless set of challenges, especially for someone with Tammy's, meticulous nature. Despite the profound limitations and the inherent temporariness of their environment, her dedication to maintaining even a semblance of home and cleanliness is truly striking. Her quote, "I clean the room every day. I'd rather do it myself." That isn't merely about personal tidiness, is it? It feels like a profound psychological coping mechanism. Having previously worked as a CNA, she understood the critical importance of hygiene in close quarters, not just for physical health, but for mental well-being. So for her, cleaning wasn't just a chore. It was a desperate way to exert control in an otherwise utterly uncontrollable situation, a way to maintain dignity and a fragile sense of normalcy in this abnormal, confining environment. It's a really powerful and often overlooked example of that unseen labor we mentioned, the constant, unacknowledged, and often exhausting effort required just to maintain basic living standards and a sense of self under chronic duress.
And the division of labor in this new temporary home, it remained just as stark, just as profoundly unequal as it was in the condemned house. Tammy detailed it with such blunt, almost painful clarity.
Walkerville soda, it's
Paul
fresh
went
and
to
from
Arby's
Christ.
and got us
All right,
something
we're
to
back.
eat, but I got to
Thinking
clean
about
the
this whole
bathroom.
journey laid out in the
I mean,
sources,
this isn't just
starting
about
as a
who
joke,
performs which
becoming the
task, right?
source
It's about
of
the
feeling alive
fundamental
again,
roles they
driven by
each
necessity,
assumed in their
leading to
daily
the secret
survival.
life.
It
One
really makes
providing
you
this
think, doesn't it,
fleeting
about
external
where people
comfort,
find, the
or
other
maybe
tirelessly, meticulously
meaning and
maintaining
freedom
the very
when things are
interior
tough.
space of their precarious
So the provocative thought
existence.
maybe stems
She even took it
directly
upon
from that
herself to
complexity.
shampoo the hotel
Given
carpet.
everything
She
we've
bought her
heard
own
from the
cleaner.
sources,
While Paul, in
the
her
mix of
stark
that
words,
personal
just
awakening, the
stood
spiritual
around.
feeling, the
It speaks
financial
volumes,
desperation,
really, about the
the
mental
physical
and physical
suffering,
burden
the
she
fear of
shouldered
judgment.
completely
What is
alone.
this
And what's
specific
truly
story
telling here is
suggest
Tammy's
about
almost
the
obsessive
maybe
focus on
unexpected or
cleanliness,
unconventional
particularly given
ways
her
people
stated
carve
physical
out a
discomfort.
sense of purpose or
Tammy
freedom or
declared,
even just
"I hate carpet.
self-worth,
I'm allergic to
especially when
carpet.
they're
I've had a
facing
headache ever
really
since we come
challenging
here."
circumstances and
Mhm.
maybe
Yet,
rejection
despite
from
this
parts of
direct
society.
physical ailment
It's a heavy
being
question,
exacerbated by their
because
living
the sources
conditions,
present such a
she
tangled
invested her
picture.
own money,
Freedom found in hardship,
$88, in a
purpose
carpet
tied
cleaner
to
from
risk,
Walmart, and
faith
meticulously
mixed
worked on the
with
hotel
secrecy.
carpet herself. This isn't just about general hygiene. It feels like a direct and desperate response to a physical discomfort that was amplifying her psychological distress. And her plan to use that same cleaner for curtains and even car seats. That reveals an incredible depth of resourcefulness and foresight, thinking strategically beyond the immediate crisis to future needs, making the most of every hard-earned dollar. It's a profound testament to her inherent drive to extract value and maintain order from every resource, even amidst these overwhelming and deeply uncomfortable challenges.
Yeah, and the physical environment, just being confined to that hotel room, it clearly had a direct and devastating impact on her mental state, too. Tammy openly discussed her struggle with depression. She noted her stark realization, saying something like, "How depressed I was till here recently." Being confined to a hotel room, dealing with the constant grinding stress of survival, the profound lack of personal space, it led to severe cabin fever. You know, that pervasive feeling of restlessness, irritability, despair that comes from prolonged confinement, especially when there's no clear end in sight. This constant psychological pressure just compounded her already significant mental health challenges. It served as a stark daily reminder that our living conditions deeply, fundamentally impact our well-being and our capacity for joy.
And this relentless struggle, it wasn't limited to Tammy alone, was it? The animals, which were clearly a significant and beloved part of their family, Mama Sia, the twins, the new cat baby, Bootsy, Fiddle, Banjo, they also got sick. They needed medication, like homeopathic feline nose relief for their colds. This just added yet another layer of responsibility, worry, and financial strain for Tammy. And Mama Sia, their cat, at a venerable 20 years old, was clearly declining, adding this profound emotional weight to Tammy's already overflowing plate. It really highlights the often unseen labor of caregiving in a crisis, where the needs of vulnerable dependents just multiply the existing burdens exponentially. And then in stark contrast to Tammy's multi-layered efforts, you have Paul's consistent pattern of relying on fast food, like Arby's. It paints this vivid picture of someone seemingly disengaged from the daily, grinding reality of their shared predicament, maintaining a level of personal comfort and detachment that Tammy was clearly not afforded. This pattern, and the evident lack of shared responsibility, that's a profound psychological burden that speaks volumes about the dynamics of their relationship. Tammy's meticulous cleaning in this context, could absolutely be seen as a deeply ingrained coping mechanism. A way to exert control in an uncontrollable situation, a desperate, almost symbolic attempt to restore order in a chaotic and uncomfortable world.
And here's the kicker, right? The perfect, almost tragically poetic metaphor for their entire dynamic. He fixed the curtain with tape. She fixed everything else with prayer.
Wow, yeah. That's a powerful and deeply telling illustration of their fundamentally differing approaches, and problem solving to responsibility, even to life itself. One, a superficial quick fix addressing only the most visible symptom. The other, this deep, persistent, spiritual and practical effort to hold literally everything else together. For you, the listener, just consider the immense unseen labor in that kind of survival mode. How much mental, emotional, physical effort does it truly take to keep basic life functioning when every single aspect is a constant grinding struggle? And what inevitably happens when that entire crushing burden is overwhelmingly placed on just one person's shoulders, the weight of it just becomes unbearable and something eventually has to give.
But despite the crushing setbacks, despite the mounting despair, Tammy's faith incredibly somehow remained unwavering. After the first RV disaster, after the hotel purgatory, she found another glimmer of hope, another potential path, however faint, out of homelessness in the form of a second RV. And her words truly capture this profound, almost desperate optimism. God made a way where there seemed to be no way. This wasn't just finding another vehicle for her. In her eyes, it was finding a vessel for their shattered dreams, a tangible, physical manifestation of divine intervention, maybe, a lifeline thrown into a raging sea.
Yeah, it's profoundly fascinating, isn't it? The sheer psychological power of hope, especially after experiencing such devastating and repeated losses. For Tammy, this second RV, it represented not just potential shelter, but maybe a fragile return to some semblance of normalcy, a chance to regain control, to chart a new course, discover a sense of purpose again. It powerfully underscores that fundamental human need for a vision of the future, a tangible goal to strive for, particularly when you've been living in the dehumanizing purgatory of a confining hotel room. This discovery must have ignited this desperate flicker of stability and possibility in a world that had become utterly, terrifyingly unstable for her. It was a moment of fragile, desperate faith.
But that glimmer of hope, that fragile optimism, it was almost immediately dampened, almost extinguished, really, by Paul's predictable reaction. Instead of mirroring her enthusiasm, instead of seizing this new opportunity with any kind of shared determination, he immediately complained it needed too much TLC, tender loving care. This immediate resistance, this focus on the effort required rather than the potential solution, sort of habitual dampening of any positive initiative, it just highlights a fundamental and deeply entrenched difference in their approach to challenges. It's a profoundly telling moment that instantly sets the stage for this new dream to crumble yet again. It was almost like his inertia was this gravitational pull, just dragging down any attempt they made to ascend.
And what's truly disheartening here is the rapid, almost inevitable repetition of failure. It creates this devastating cycle. The disastrous attempt to haul this second RV resulted in what Tammy, with a weary sense of déjà vu, called a familiar outcome. Tires blew again. This wasn't just bad luck. It tragically mirrored the previous RV incident, emphasizing this disturbing pattern of misfortune, or maybe a chronic lack of proper planning and execution. This second devastating failure wasn't merely mechanical, it was profoundly psychological, systematically undermining the very hope that had just been kindled. And the crushing reality that there was no money to recover it just cemented the total irrecoverable loss of the RV and the considerable investment, leaving them right back at square one, but with an even heavier, more demoralizing burden of debt and disappointment. This recurring pattern of financial loss and failed attempts at securing stable housing, it reveals this deeply entrenched cycle that's incredibly difficult to break free from without significant external intervention or a fundamental internal shift in dynamics within the partnership.
And yet, Despite this monumental setback, despite losing another $2,000 to this cruel twist of fate, Tammy's resilience shines through in this truly remarkable, almost unbelievable way. She framed the experience with an almost defiant optimism, a stunning refusal to be completely defeated. She said, "I lost $2,000, but it was a learning experience." This extraordinary ability to find a positive outlook, to extract a lesson from repeated soul-crushing failures, it's just astonishing. It speaks volumes about her inherent internal fortitude, her unwavering determination to keep moving forward, even when the path is consistently littered with broken dreams, false starts, and immense financial losses. Like you said, it wasn't just rubber on the road. It was another nail in the dream's coffin. Yet Tammy still found a way to see it as a lesson.
Right. And this profound resilience contrasted so sharply with Paul's consistent apathy. It raises an important question. What exactly contributes to such repeated setbacks beyond just mere bad luck? We clearly see Tammy's persistent resilience. It's a stark contrast to what appears to be Paul's evident learned helplessness, perhaps, or maybe a deeper lack of engagement. Learned helplessness, it's a psychological concept where an individual, after experiencing repeated failures or unpleasant things they can't avoid, eventually just stops trying to change the situation, even when opportunities for release become available. We see Tammy, despite everything, continuing to strive, to find a learning experience, to seek new solutions. Conversely, Paul often appears to just passively await a break rather than actively trying to create one. For you, the listener, think about how different individuals confront repeated failures. What distinguishes that internal response? Where some, like Tammy, manage to find a silver lining and keep striving, while others might fall into deeper despair or resignation. And what external support systems, beyond just individual fortitude, are truly needed to break free from such a relentless cycle of misfortune and financial depletion?
So as their struggle intensified, as their options just dwindled, the fundamental division between Tammy and Paul only deepened. It laid bare the unsustainable nature of their dynamic. A central, really agonizing piece of this imbalance was Paul's consistent, unwavering reluctance to work. Tammy recounted this pervasive pattern of excuses, including his claim seizures, and various other reasons that consistently prevented him from contributing financially to their survival. Now, she did mention one specific instance where he had a little episode that prevented work, but it was pretty clear this was part of an overarching and persistent pattern of him simply not working, or at least not consistently holding down a job that could actually provide for them.
And this chronic pattern of non-contribution meant that the primary, indeed almost the entire burden of their survival, fell squarely and relentlessly on Tammy's shoulders. This is a critical point in truly understanding the unbearable dynamic of the relationship under extreme duress. She wasn't only navigating the profound trauma of eviction and homelessness, the constant anxiety of finding shelter and food. She was also the sole engine driving their daily existence. The one constantly seeking solutions, managing the household, securing resources. This immense weight isn't just financial. It's an overwhelming emotional, physical, and psychological burden. It's the burden of constant worry, the relentless effort of problem solving for two people, and the sheer debilitating exhaustion of carrying the entire weight of two lives, human and animal, in a crisis.
And her efforts were truly multifaceted, weren't they? Relentless, often humbling. Tammy was constantly on the move, trying every conceivable avenue to keep them afloat. She stayed with animals, making sure their beloved pets were cared for amidst the chaos, which, as we discussed, was a huge, often unseen responsibility in itself. She continued, with incredible dedication, to clean rooms at the hotel, maintaining her exacting standards of hygiene, that desperate act of control in an uncontrollable situation. And in a really poignant display of desperation, she relentlessly begged churches for help, reaching out to any and every avenue for assistance, laying bare their vulnerability to strangers.
Yeah. And her direct statement, tinged with that raw desperation, it just resonates so deeply. Paul's got to work. I can't do it all by myself. This isn't just a plea for financial contribution, is it? It's a desperate, almost primal cry for partnership, for shared responsibility, for recognition of the utterly unsustainable nature of their situation. It highlights the profound, bone-deep exhaustion that comes from being the sole provider, the sole problem solver, the sole emotional support, the sole caregiver in a protracted, unrelenting crisis. This level of sustained individual effort, without reciprocal contribution from the other partner, it inevitably leads to burnout, resentment, and, as we'll ultimately see, the inevitable dissolution of the relationship itself. It becomes less of a partnership and more of a profound, crushing imbalance.
And while Tammy was engaged in this constant, exhausting battle for basic necessities, her personal survival strategies became this stark testament to her incredible resourcefulness. She meticulously drank lemon water, connecting it directly to her previous COVID experience and emphasizing hydration, a simple yet powerful act of self-care, and a desperate attempt to maintain her own health amidst unimaginable stress. She even used Arby's coupons for food, illustrating the constant, grinding, almost humiliating battle for basic sustenance. Meanwhile, Paul's reported state was this stark, almost infuriating contrast. He was still waiting for a break. It's a profound illustration of continued detachment, his apparent indifference to their shared crisis, while Tammy was literally fighting for every bite, every sip of hydration, every semblance of normalcy. She was surviving off lemon water and Arby's coupons while he was still waiting for a break to magically appear.
Right. And what's truly fascinating here are the psychological factors that might lead to one person's profound and sustained effort and the other's apparent apathy or passive resistance. Is a coping mechanism, a deep form of denial, or maybe a more profound inability to engage with the crisis. This dynamic, playing out under extreme duress, it's common, sadly, yet always heartbreaking to witness. In this segment, it really offers a prime opportunity to connect Tammy's personal story to the broader, often invisible challenges of poverty and access to resources in places like East Tennessee. Tammy herself spoke about this, didn't she? Recalling a poignant conversation with a Nashville preacher who acknowledged how bad it truly was in East Tennessee compared to Nashville, specifically noting the stark lack of support systems available for people like them, for families facing such overwhelming odds. It's a painful reminder that sometimes even sheer indomitable effort and resilience just aren't enough when systemic issues severely limit options and opportunities for escape.
So, after years of this increasingly untenable, profoundly imbalanced dynamic, the inevitable finally arrived. The painful finality of their separation was captured in our last video together. It was this raw, poignant moment where they explicitly stated, with a visible mix of weariness and maybe resolution, we're heading to divorce court. It was a permanent separation, marking the heartbreaking end of 23 real lives together, a remarkable 23 and a half years of being together, a significant defining chunk of both of their lives. The house had finally fallen, both literally and figuratively.
Yeah, and this decision, while they presented it publicly as mutual, it clearly stemmed from a deep-seated fundamental need on Tammy's part for something that Paul, despite their long history, could no longer provide, or maybe never really did. Her primary, indeed her paramount desire for her future partner was stated so unequivocally. What I want in a man is stability. That single word, stability, it just encapsulates the entire grueling narrative we've just explored. The lack of clean running water, the failed RV dreams, the constant crushing financial strain of motel life, the disproportionate and exhausting burden she consistently carried. For Tammy, stability wasn't just a preference, a nice to have. It was a desperate, foundational, soul-deep need that Paul, through his consistent inaction and excuses, had proven utterly incapable of fulfilling. It's a stark reflection of how chronic stress, pervasive insecurity, and an unequal partnership can fundamentally redefine one's core values and priorities in a relationship, leading to an undeniable shift in what one truly seeks in a life partner.
And Paul's stance, predictably, offered this stark, almost jarring contrast to Tammy's active search for a new partner and a fundamentally different future. He stated, with a clear note of disinterest, "I'm not looking for a wife." He even went so far as to joke, kind of darkly, that he'd be solvent till you die if the Lord didn't intervene. A flippant, almost cynical remark that perhaps reflected his own deep disengagement from the idea of partnership, shared responsibility, mutual support, everything Tammy so desperately craved and needed. It's a statement that really summarizes his perspective on their shared struggles and maybe his future.
And the immediate aftermath of their separation, even while they were still in the continued, albeit temporary, confines of their shared hotel room, it painted this clear, almost painful picture of their new, dislocated reality. They lived for a time like roommates, occupying the same small space but fundamentally separate. Paul sleeps on an air mattress. She sleeps on the bed with the animals. This physical arrangement, even before the official divorce decree, powerfully symbolized the emotional distance and the fundamental, irreparable shift in their relationship dynamic. While they presented the divorce as mutual, stemming from them growing apart, Tammy's proactive and hopeful step of having met somebody special indicates her active pursuit of a new path and the stability he profoundly craves. A stark divergence from Paul's apparent contentment, maybe, with his current unattached situation.
Right. And for those who followed their online life, there was also the distinct and often controversial Pauline character. This wasn't just some casual online quirk, it was a past point of tension, a character that Paul had created initially as a dare, apparently, that unexpectedly became popular. However, it also drew significant criticism from some viewers who felt it was against God's ways, or even indicative of a demon spirit. This character, beyond the public controversy, it provides crucial context for some of the external pressures and, perhaps more importantly, internal disagreements that may have contributed to them growing apart. While Tammy battled tirelessly for their literal survival, Paul was engaging in something that, to some, bordered on the sacrilegious, creating this profound, almost spiritual chasm in how they navigated their shared life and public perception, undoubtedly contributing to their deep divide.
Absolutely. This evolution of a relationship under chronic, unrelenting stress, ultimately leading to such fundamental differences in values, coping mechanisms, even life aspirations.
It's a powerful and sobering study. The quest for stability becomes paramount, doesn't it? An existential necessity when daily survival is constantly challenged and precarious. Tammy's decisive agency in actively seeking a new path, in pursuing a new relationship that promised the stability she longed for, even while navigating the complexities and emotional weight of ending a decades-long marriage. It highlights her powerful self-preservation instinct and her unwavering drive for a better, more secure life. This separation, while undoubtedly painful, it represents her ultimate courageous decision to prioritize her own well-being and her profound, fundamental need for a reliable, stable foundation. After 23 years, all she truly wanted, all she fundamentally yearned for, was just a profound sense of peace.
And in the simplest, most poignant terms, a working toilet.
Exactly. Hashtag, outer.
Yeah.
So, the fall of the House of Ollis wasn't some sudden, cataclysmic collapse. It was a slow, agonizing dissolution. The house didn't fall overnight in one dramatic implosion. No, instead, it rotted piece by painful piece, slowly decaying under the immense cumulative weight of a man who wouldn't lift a finger to shore it up, and a woman who never, ever stopped lifting. Tammy's story is just an enduring testament to the immense, often unseen and frequently unacknowledged labor of holding an entire life together when you're faced with overwhelming, compounding odds and an unequal partnership.
And in that incredibly challenging journey, we see Tammy Ollis embody so many roles, often simultaneously, with a spirit that almost defies explanation. She was the meticulous hotel cleaner, the unwavering prayer warrior, the devoted caregiver for both humans and animals, and above all, the relentless survivor. Her sheer endurance is truly remarkable. Her indomitable spirit is a powerful beacon. Despite every setback, every crushing financial blow, every emotional strain, every broken promise, she just continued to pray, to clean, to care for those around her, human and animal alike, demonstrating an almost superhuman capacity for resilience.
Yeah. And this wasn't the end of Tammy's story, not by a long shot. It was simply the prelude. Because as long as Tammy's still standing, as long as she's still fighting, there's still a powerful, deeply human story to tell. Her quest for stability, for peace, for something as basic yet profound as a working toilet. It's a deeply universal human yearning that resonates far beyond the specifics of her extraordinary situation. It's about finding a foothold in a world that just keeps shifting under your feet.
It really leaves us with a provocative thought, doesn't it? What does it truly mean to find stability, not just in physical spaces, a home, a fixed address, but within oneself? Especially when all external structures, all the physical and relational foundations, just relentlessly collapse around you. How often do we overlook the profound, silent labor and the immense emotional toll taken by those individuals who tirelessly hold everything together day after day? There are stories of deep, tenacious resilience going unacknowledged until, finally, something irrevocably breaks. It's a powerful, resonant reminder that true strength isn't always about grand, heroic gestures. It's often about the relentless, unglamorous, everyday act of simply not giving up, of continuing to put one foot in front of the other, even when the entire world seems to conspire against you.